Managing inventories, particularly the finances that surround them, can provide challenges and a lot of admin work. We might need to regularly calculate KPIs or sales projections based on our current stock level and predicted sales. The trouble is that these kinds of calculations require bits of data that are stored in different parts of our systems that we need to manually aggregate and pull together in a way where there are lots of room for mistakes. Hi, I'm Kevin from Budibase, and today I want to show you how we can build an inventory calculator app. It's a relatively simple internal tool, but it's a really powerful one and allows you to have more confidence in the calculations that you have and the results you're getting. Effectively, there are three layers. There's the data layer, where we're going to have any of the data that we need for our calculation. There's the process layer, where we create our calculation. And then there's the user interface layer, where we allow people to change the values and get the results back again. The calculations themselves could be about anything really, but the most common use is about stock levels or values across a given time period. So what we'll build is an inventory calculator. So we'll give a start date, say the 1st of October, an end date, say the 30th of November, and it'll generate some charts showing the total stock change over that time. We can optionally drill down and see what this deal is for individual items. That's what we're doing. Let's dive in. If you haven't already, you can sign up for a free Budibase account at budibase.com. or host your own instance of Budibase wherever you'd like. Once you've got set up and configured, you'll land at this Budibase portal, where you can create new applications and look after the ones that you already have. Let's create a new one. When you create a new application, you'll be presented with a whole load of templates that we've provided as starting off points for your applications. You could import a previously developed application, maybe you've done on the cloud and you're moving it to your local instance, or you can start from scratch, which is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to call my inventory calculator, and I'll create that application. At Budibase, we want to help you turn your data into action. So the first thing I want to ask you is, where is your data? Is it in a collection of REST API endpoints? Is it in a relational or a non-relational database? Or is it on a spreadsheet application? My data is in a Postgres database. So I'm going to add my connection details, turn on SSL, and connect. Once I've done that, Budibase will fetch all of the tables that are on my database, and I can decide which ones I need. I'm going to need 5 tables, not all of these. I'm going to need my consignments table. I'm going to need my inventory table. I'm going to need my sales, returns, and shipments, and I'll fetch them. Once fetched, the tables are available on the left-hand side. I can click into them, I can see their data structure, and I can get full CRUD functionality just from here. So I can create, read, update, and delete records directly from here, and that'll be respected in my database. My consignments table has got reference to the shipment ID and the inventory ID. The inventory has got reference to the vendor ID, which we're not using for this particular query. Returns are telling me a relation to the sale ID. The sale is giving me the quantity of the sale of what item was sold and when. And my shipments have my date, when they arrived, when they were purchased, and where it links to the shipment number. So our data at the moment is just sitting in these separate places, and we want to pull it together to work out our calculations. And that's where our custom queries come in. So I'm going to click on Queries, Create New Query, and the first query I'm going to create is going to be called our inventory change by item. And it's going to be made up of 3 parts. 2 custom table expressions or CTEs, 1 to work out the date range, and 1 to work out all of the stock changes, and then our actual query. So let's look at the CTEs first. The first CTE is going to be the date range. So with date range as, and what I would like to do is select a range of dates between 2 variables, so select, but in order for me to have variables that are changeable by my user, I have to create bindings. So I'll create a binding called start date, which I'll initialize at, have a default value of 2023 0901, and end date, which I'll have at 2023 11:30. So I can now use that here, start date, in handlebars notation, and it'll be injected. I want to cast that as a date and call it start date. And then I also want to get the end date, which I want to cast as a date and call it end date. That way, all of my casting is done up front and I can reference these later on in my calculation, which is great. Now I want to get my all stock changes. And there are three ways that my stock can change. I can make a sale, I can have a return, or I can have a shipment. Sale is going to reduce my stock levels, and the other two are going to increase them. But they all have the same fields: the item name, the month or year it happened, and the quantity it changed in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to union or combine together three selects that have the same fields that will get combined. So let's have a look. So I'm going to select c.item. I'm going to get the date month by truncating month from our s.arrive date. I'm going to call that month year. And then I'm going to get the sum of c quantity as stock change. Which table I'm going to get that from? From the consignments table, which I'll call C, consignments, C. I need to join that onto the shipments table. So I'll join shipments S on the shipment ID from the consignments table and the shipment number from the shipments table. I'll group those by the item name and the month year. So that's my first all stock. This is when I actually something arrives by consignment. I'm going to union all and do my next select. And it's going to look almost identical. So let me just copy everything that's up here and paste it down here. This time I want to get from my sales table. So I'll call S. I don't need to do a join this time because everything I need is in the sales table. So it's called s.item name. I'm going to truncate the date, not from the arrival date, but from just the date. And the quantity is going to come from S as well. Okay, so the same three fields is why we can use union all are going to be combined. The only difference is that the sales will make my stock decrease. So I'll stick a minus there to show that. I'll do another union all. I'll copy my first query again, and then I'll just change it for the returns the other way that our stock can change. So this time I'm going to get the sales table because actually the returns doesn't tell me very much. So I'll need to join the returns onto the returns table. I'm going to join it on the s.id from the sales table and the r.sale ID from the returns table. Where will I get the item name? I'll get that from the sales. Where will I truncate the date? Well, I'm going to get that from the returns table, return.complete date. And the stock change is going to be from my sales table as well. And I'm going to group by s.item name. So there we go. We've got three different ways our stock can change. We're gathering the data and we're squishing it together so we get the all stock changes. So now that we have that, we can actually write our main select statement. So I'm going to select a.item name, the sum of a.stock change. I'm going to call that total stock change. As always, all of these queries are going to be in the accompanying blog post, so don't feel like you have to copy them all down. You can just copy and paste them from there. I'm going to do stock change multiplied by i.unit price. I'm going to call that total stock value change. Where am I going to get that from? Well, that's CTE. I'm going to get it from all stock changes, which I'm calling A. And then I'm going to join on to that the right dates. Okay, so join date range D on date trunk month from our a.month here between d.start date and d.end date. We'll then join on our inventory data on a.item name equal to i.item name. Lastly, we'll group those by a.item name and we'll order them by a.item name as well. Let's run that query and we'll get the first item back. Item name bulldozer, total stock 100, total stock value change 2100. We see the schema, so that's text, number, and number. And we get a preview, which shows us all the details there. We'll save that query and we'll duplicate it so we don't have to do a lot of that same work for the next one, which is going to be our inventory changes aggregate. So for this query, our CTEs are going to be exactly the same. It's just our main query that we're going to alter slightly. So we're going to have total as totals, a.stock change as total stock change, fine, and a.stock value as total, that's the same as well. Join on inventory a.item name, and we're not going to group this time. Okay, so if we run that, we can see the total changes. In fact, we only get one row back. Because we're not grouping, this only happening once. So the totals, the sum, and the total change. Let's save that. And now we're ready to start building our form. So go to design, go to blank, and just leave it as a /, and I can choose my role-based access control. Public means anyone can do this without login. Basic means you have to get logged in. Power and admin are both elevated roles that allow you to segment your application. I'm going to leave it at basic and click done. This screen is going to have a form and a series of charts that are going to visualize the results. We'll start by adding a form component, which everything else will be nested inside of this. Inside of our form, we'll put a container and we'll have horizontal alignment. And the first thing we want to have is a headline. Maybe make it bold, maybe give it a 50% width. So styles, custom CSS, width 50%. Save. Beside this, we'll put a button and we'll set it to be quiet. So remove the border and we'll just say clear. We'll click on no action set. And what will get us to do is to clear our form. Which form? Our only form. And we'll clear that. So my container, I'll go to styles and I'll set the width to be 50%. And I'll use some custom CSS, setting the margin to auto, which will center this container. Below this container, I'm going to add a field group. So I want to be inside the container. I do want to be inside the form. And again, I want this to be size 50%. And I want it in the middle. So I'll just set margin to auto. Now there are two fields I want to add inside here. And they're both date pickers. And this is going to be our start date. Start date. And if we duplicate it, we'll have our end date as well. End date. We don't need time, so let's just uncheck the time box. Now we're also going to have an optional field of our item name. So inside our field group, let's add another picker. We'll call this our item picker. And then our label could say item name optional. Now we're going to need to set our option source to custom. And then we can define our options. So that's the excavator, a raker, a skid steer. And if your backend has a slightly different casing or spelling, you can update that for the front end and keep those separate. That's why we've got a separate label and value. Sometimes you've got everything is lowercase on the back end, or you have underscores where you want spaces on the front end. So this label and value option just gives you the opportunity to change both of those. Compactor, mixer, and one more is a grader. We'll save. So I've got those option pickers ready to go. Next, we want to create the bar charts that will display the results of our inventory calculations. We'll actually have two separate pairs of charts and display either one depending on whether or not the user has specified a particular item. So we'll start by adding another horizontal container which has 50% width. So there. So styles, width, 50%, and then margin auto. Inside of this, we'll place another headline component. And the headline here is just going to say results. And beneath this, we'll add another horizontal container, which will be called our charts container. And we'll set that to be horizontal. Let's also give that a horizontal alignment of center And let's give it some padding at the top. Let's give it maybe 16 pixels of padding so it has a bit of room. So this is going to be our charts container. This is where we're going to have both of our charts. So let's add a chart block. And for the chart type, we'll set it to bar. The data we want to use is actually from our inventory change aggregate query. For the label, I'll set it to totals. And for the data, I'll set it to stock change. So here we've got the total stock change. But this is the total stock change over all time. What I actually want is the total stock change based on my form dates. So I can go to my data and hit this cog. And I have those two bindings I created in the query, start date and end date. So for the start date, I'll hit the lightning bolt. I'll go to form and I'll click start date and save. And for the end date, I'll do the same. Form and end date just there. I'll save that. It's going to use the default values while I'm on this page. But when I go to my preview, I can change these dates. So say I just wanted to do today where I know there are no records in here. There's no chart because there's no data to be able to manage that. If I move the start date back a couple of months, then I can see that that's how the stock has changed between those two dates. I'll duplicate that chart and I'll change the data instead of being stock change, being stock value. So now I can see the stock change and the stock value. The Y labels are important because they're on different scales and we might want to just color them differently so that we just are making that stand out that they are on different scales or different graphs. They're showing different things. Let's duplicate that entire column and we're going to switch over the query to be our other one, our inventory change by item. We'll change the label column to be item name this time. And here we see the stock change by item name. So we say, okay, we've gone down on the compactors over this time and the rest of that showing. And do the same for this graph. Change the query to be by item and change the label to be item name. I want to link these graphs up to the item name in our form filter. So I'm going to go to filters and add a filter to say the item name equals the binding of our form value item and save. And I'll do the same for this one. So add filter, item name equals the binding of our form item and save. So now, when you don't select an item name, you get a graph showing all of the stock change by item and the totals combined. When you do select an item name, like for our bulldozer, we get the data just for the bulldozer. Now you could stop there. So we can conditionally render this particular block or this particular block based on particular conditions. Let's only show this chart when the date fields have actually been selected. That makes sense. We want to hide the component if the form start date is empty or the form end date is empty. And for this container, we'll do the same thing. So we'll add a hide the component if the form of the start date is empty or the form of the end date is empty. Now, depending on your preference, you could also hide this chart if an item name hadn't been selected. I quite like having it in, so I'm going to leave that there on preview. So right, there's nothing showing. So let's put in some dates. Let's do from the 1st of October to the 31st of October. Now our charts are showing. Brill. Now we can change the particular category so we just see the right one. I think that's starting to look pretty good and pretty useful as a calculator. Before we publish, we might want to make a few sort of design tweaks. First, I think making this a bit darker. So screen, theme, and darkest. I think our graphs look a little bit better there. Let's just see them in practice. And then you could play around with the color palettes to decide which one you thought was best. And the last thing I'll do is that form element. I'm going to click on large, just so it takes up a bit more room. It looks a bit better. I might put a margin above that results container, move it down a wee bit. Just trying to tidy this up so it looks a bit clearer. So there you go. We create a query to encapsulate work and calculations that we're doing regularly so that we can make sure that they can be handled by anyone with accuracy. It's querying our live data and allowing us to work out the things we want to know quickly without having to gather that data manually from separate tables, collate it, aggregate it, and make our calculations. We get these nice visual representations that when we hover over, we're getting the exact values, which we can now take and put into any report that we might want to build. Hope you found this useful and you've got some ideas for the types of inventory calculators you might want to be creating for your business and your use case. Comment below if you'd like to suggest anything else you'd like us to build, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.